you've had an opportunity to read this,
yes.
obviously. I saw a wonderful quote about her, which said that Truss is mad, but she was right. Rishi Sunak is sane, but he's too conservative. Where do you think we stand on this? Does she have reason to make these claims that she was misunderstood, or is it a bit more serious than that?
So I think Liz was right in terms of the need for growth in our economy, but that's also something that Rishi believes in and is working towards as well. All Conservatives believe in low tax, including this government. But I think what Rishi is doing is taking a far more pragmatic approach than Liz. And actually, in the leadership election, I'm on record as supporting Liz. But where I was always shocked is, whilst I agreed with the low tax diagnosis, it didn't come with the efficiencies, the potential cuts and the bigger picture that you expect to see. So I think she went too far, too fast, which was what was said at the time. And actually, there just wasn't that pragmatism which we need in politics, particularly when we've got a cost of living crisis.
I mean, it's interesting that, she does say she shoulders some of the blame, though obviously she's putting most of it on other people. But it all boils down to, doesn't it? A lot of it was down to the 45p tax rate. Because everybody was shocked about that.
Yeah.
That seemed to come out of nowhere. And though there may be good reasons for doing it, if that hadn't have been done, she might have survived all this, mightn't she?
Yeah, I think that did come as a real shock, especially considering the climate that we're in, where people are really, really struggling. So I think where Rishi's administration has done a lot better, and certainly settling the markets is a start, is actually focusing first and foremost on the most vulnerable in society, so really tackling that cost of living crisis. But you're right, that 45p proposition came as a real shock, and I think was the beginning of the quick end.
She's been quiet since the downfall. She's come out with this interview in the Telegraph today. She's planning to speak quite forcibly against China in a speech that she's about to give. Is she making a play for power again, do you think? Or is she just trying to re-establish her political credibility?
I'm not sure whether she's making another play for number 10. I think that's probably unlikely. But I suppose she's still an MP and she still wants to have a voice in Parliament. And I think, first of all, there is a voice for talking about low tax and growth. We've seen Simon Clarke come out in recent days about this new growth group in the Conservative Party, which I think is an interesting initiative. And I think on China, she's right to start the debate. We've seen what's happened with the last news story. But actually, Rishi's government have kind of increased the rhetoric against China. So I think both of the issues she's talking about are relevant, and I suppose it gives her a space to talk about, but I don't think a return to number 10 would be appropriate anytime soon.
But it's interesting, with that strong rhetoric on foreign affairs issues, which, of course, she was Foreign Secretary, wasn't she? She sort of knows her stuff. However, in terms of, even dealing with our closest neighbour, France, she actually created problems rather than mended any fences. We do seem to, on the immigration issue at least we've got France a bit more on side now. Yeah,
you do have to be really careful with diplomatic language, and you don't want to ramp up tensions too much unnecessarily. And actually, in Rishi's speech when he first became Prime Minister on China, he spoke about the end of a golden era, which I think is the right approach, and to take decisive action when it is needed. But you do have to be very careful with your language.
What sort of support has she got in the Commons at the moment? Because she did have quite an interesting group of people around her when she was bidding to become Prime Minister. Yeah. Have they stayed with her? Are they going to support her again, do you think? Or is she out on the limb a bit on her own at the moment?
I don't think she's got support as an individual, so there's no kind of bring back Liz as PM going on from as far as I can see. But I do think there's support around this growth agenda and the low tax agenda. Fundamentally, these are Conservative principles, and we have seen pressure on the government to lower taxes quicker. So I imagine she'll be part of that pressure group. But I don't think the support is specifically towards her, but more the policy ideas.
I wonder, because you said you supported Liz in the leadership campaign.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like, now, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like you said, well, yeah, we did that, we tried it. it's time for a grown-up now?
Well, I regretted that we got into the situation where we had that leadership campaign, actually, personally. But actually, I supported Liz because ideologically I agreed with what she was saying. I believe in low tax. I think it's the best way to grow our economy and actually support the most vulnerable by giving them more money in their pocket. But from what I saw in her short time as Prime Minister, she just did too much too soon. As politicians, you've always got to be pragmatic. And I think Liz did lack that pragmatism. So I was disappointed in that very short tenure. And actually, I think Rishi's brought stability.
But despite the fact we are in a high tax economy, high tax and low growth actually at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a really difficult situation, but we do have to remember we spent billions and billions of pounds on COVID. So it's a really difficult time. And I think Rishi's doing the right thing to try and stabilise the economy, bring in some money through tax, and hopefully, as we build up to 2024, the election, we see them taxes coming down again.
Yeah, but she is talking about wanting tax cuts, smaller state, in other words, giving much more responsibility to local councils, and a hawkish foreign policy. I mean, she's got very specific ideas about the way she thinks the government should be run at the moment, even though she's on the backbenches rather than in the Cabinet Office, hasn't she?
I suppose she needs to find a kind of a role for herself as a parliamentarian. I think, as I say, I think she's right to pursue and push for tax cuts, but actually the government have already said we want to deliver tax cuts when the time is right. And I suppose the time will be right once we see inflation halve, which is that kind of key goal of the government, because we need that to kind of get the economy going again.